Well, good morning, everybody. I was so fortunate that I was able to visit your community several times for services about a year ago, November. I still can't believe it's been over a year ago. And I absolutely loved your campus. I loved the people there. The praise and worship team was amazing. The music was wonderful. And I really look forward to the time when I can come back and be with you all in sacred spiritual community in person. So, the title of my talk is That's My Story, and I'm Willing to Give It Up. Now, we all have a story, that collection of experiences we've had in our lives. Some of our stories are positive, and some leave a lot to be desired. But what we often do is latch onto the challenging ones, making them the central narrative through which we filter current and future events. So I have two stories from my life to share with you. When I was about 6 months old, I had big brown eyes and slicked down jet black hair, and I was smiling all the time. And when I look at pictures of myself from that age, it seems like I was just so excited to be here. My mother used to tell me stories about taking me out in the stroller as a toddler and double strapping me in because she was afraid I might fall out because I was always jumping up and down and waving and trying to say hi to everybody. And in those pictures, what I see is this vibrant light that oozed from every pore of my body. And I'm sure I thought that life, no matter what it was, every day, was exciting and new. I was fed and I was clothed and I was bathed and I was held, and people oohed and awed all over me. Life was simply wonderful. But as I was growing up, things started to change. The external messages I was getting from those around me weren't quite as rosy, and just being myself became a challenge. Now, whether you're a boy or a girl or however you identify yourself, some of these might sound familiar to you. Things like, you're not smart enough, or you're too smart for your own good. Your race or your sexual orientation is not acceptable. You're not Black, Hispanic, gay, straight, whatever, enough. You're too tall or you're too short. You're too fat or you're too thin. You're too young or you're too old. Your faith is wrong or you need to hold certain beliefs. You don't make enough money or you make too much money. You really should drive this car. You should wear these clothes. You don't belong in this neighborhood. Or you've forgotten where you came from if you live in a certain place or manner. And this list goes on and on and on. And these supposed guidelines for living can be heavy burdens to bear. Here's a second story from my life for you. In the spring and summer months, I used to like to ride my bike to the gym. It was a great way to get exercise. It was only about 2 miles from my house. The path was flat, and I loved leaving my car at home. And I always went the same way, just kind of out of habit, but I had been thinking for a while about changing it up a bit, just to do something different. So on Tuesday, July 18th, 2017, I left my house, went up to the first corner, and that's where I always turn right. And when I got to the corner, I thought, you know what? Let's make today the day. Let's go straight. So I crossed over the street, was riding downhill, not particularly fast, totally aware of my surroundings. And when I looked up ahead, I saw what looked like rocks and gravel strewn across the sidewalk. And I realized that in my attempts to avoid the rocks and gravel, I overcompensated by squeezing both brakes. The bike screeched to a halt, the back wheel reared up, and all I heard myself say was, and just like in the movies, like when they're perhaps trying to show someone having a flashback or an out-of-body experience, everything went white. And when the whiteness disappeared and life came back into focus, I found myself on the ground on all fours with most of my weight on my left arm. And due to the intense pain, it took me about 10 seconds to realize that I had probably broken that arm. Even to this day, I don't remember anything that happened in between the white. The only evidence I had that I had obviously gone over the handlebars and rolled was that my bike and my backpack were up on the sidewalk in front of me. I had road rash all over my body. And when I looked back at my helmet later, I could see the scratches where my head had obviously hit the ground. Fortunately, I was able to reach my backpack with my right arm, pull out my cell phone, and I called a friend of mine who lived about 2 blocks away to come and help me. So as I'm laying there on the ground in intense pain all by myself, the first thing I thought of after I hung up with my friend was, Lysa, say your gratitude list. So I just started talking out loud, everything that I could think of. I'm on the sidewalk and not in the street. It's daytime and not nighttime. It's a sunny day and not raining. I'm only about 2 blocks from the hospital. I have health insurance. My friend who's coming to get me, she'll know exactly what to do. And the biggest thing on that gratitude list for me was, God is here. A man jogging by, my friend that I had called, and some people driving down the street who saw me on the ground all stopped right around the same time and called 911. So after the police came and the paramedics, I was put on the stretcher and put in the ambulance for the ride to the hospital. And on the way, I asked the very cute, I might add, paramedics, I hadn't hit my head so hard that I missed that one, if they would say my gratitude list with me. And one of them said, well, what's a gratitude list? And I said, it's all the things I have to be grateful for, even while this is happening to me right now. So they both jumped right in and said it with me. So after I got to the emergency room, I got the distressing news that I had actually broken my left elbow. And I will spare you the gory details of what fortunately was going on out here that I couldn't really see. But I had to have surgery, and right away. So as you might imagine, once I got home, all drugged up, my arm wrapped from my shoulder all the way down to my hand, that gratitude list was nowhere to be found. And to top it all off, many of the abilities I had, and then realized I took for granted, were suddenly taken away, even if only temporarily. Cooking, driving, typing on the computer with both hands, brushing my hair, opening the toothpaste, changing my clothes, tying my shoes, everything was a challenge. Being grateful for what I could do was nowhere to be found. In the early days of my recovery, I realized what I was really suffering from was an overwhelming feeling of worthlessness. And what I was telling myself about those breaks in my arm was, see, you can't do anything right. Why did you have to go a different way to the gym that day? The other way was working just fine. You always make bad decisions. These problems you're having, they're all your fault. You're no good to anybody like this. Here again, I was tying my self-worth to my old childhood stories, what other people had to say about me. But like I said before, we all have a story, that collection of experiences we've had in our lives. And in latching onto the challenging ones, we allow our ego, our inner critic, to sit on our shoulder and whisper them to us over and over and over. In the book Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping, he talks about something that he calls a forgiveness centrifuge. And the forgiveness centrifuge, he says, we can use to filter out the true and untrue parts of our stories. He explains it kind of like a juicer, where you put something in, spin it around, and separate those two parts. And he says we can use that centrifuge to separate the facts of what happened in our lives from our interpretation of the facts. So, for example, your fact may have been that as a child, your father left the family. Your interpretation of that fact might have been that it was because of you, that you were bad or wrong, or you didn't do something that you should have done, or you did something that you shouldn't have done, and you took his leaving to mean that it was about you. Your fact may have been that you had a certain career goal that maybe other people said was beneath you, or that boys or girls can't or shouldn't do or be that. Your interpretation might have been, well, my ideas are stupid. Or, I can't be trusted to make good decisions, so I need to ask everybody else what I'm supposed to do. Or you may have even thought, well, who am I to have a dream in the first place? And these false stories that we tell ourselves work in the same way by what on all accounts might be considered a positive situation. So I have a friend who said that she had a wonderful childhood. She loved every minute of it. She was told how smart she was and how resourceful she was. She played well with others. She ate her vegetables. She was just a lovey to be around. Nothing but positive input. Those were her facts. Her interpretation of those facts, however, was that because of all those accolades, she had no room for error. If she messed up, people would see that she really didn't have it all together and that she was a failure. But once we can clearly see the difference between the facts of what happened in our lives and our interpretation of the facts, we can make conscious choices guided by our higher selves about whether or not those stories are serving us any longer. Now, the willingness to look at our old stories is not about spiritual bypassing or what some people might call denial or looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Rather, knowing that we have the power to reframe our old stories. So I have 5 steps to help you do just that. To take a story, decipher which part of it is true and which isn't, which is error thinking, and for the latter, reframe it to chart a new conscious path for the future. So are you ready? Here we go. Step number 1, stop and take a deep breath. Stop and take a deep breath. Wherever you are, let's just do that right now, real quickly. When you do that, you leave even at least just a little bit of space for perhaps something new to come in. Step number 2, thank the old story for getting your attention. Thank the old story for getting your attention. No matter what it is, it's trying to tell you something. Step number 3, examine the old story. Examine the old story. Is that story you're telling yourself absolutely true? How is it true? Why is it true? Could there be any other interpretation? Do the people who love and support you the most believe that story too? If you're having trouble answering any of these questions, more than likely it's your inner critic that's doing the talking. Step number 4, reframe the old story. Reframe the old story. You can ask yourself things like, what is the opposite of this story? Or how do I want to feel without the burden of this story? Or what if I choose not to believe this story this time at all? And step number 5, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. You're changing negative patterns of thought that have been deeply rooted in your subconscious mind, sometimes for years. And it takes time. Beating yourself up for still having that old story is like going to the gym one time and woohoo, your body looking exactly the way you want it to. But it doesn't work that way. We're just putting one old story in that forgiveness centrifuge at a time, spinning it up, and separating the facts of what happened in our lives from our interpretation of the facts. If you practice these 5 steps on a regular basis, I guarantee you will experience amazing results. So I have a new arm. I call it my new bionic arm. And if you were to look at pictures of the x-rays, you would see pins where they put in to stabilize the bones, and then a plate holding it all together. So what I say now about those cracks in my arm, those old outdated stories, is this. I am adventuresome and like to try new things. I am capable and smart. My vulnerability is one of my strengths. People love me for who I am, not what I can do. I am grateful for the lessons and blessings in this experience. And at that metal plate holding it all together, I say to myself, I am worthy and I love myself just the way I am. And to that cute little girl in the picture, I say, you are a perfect expression of God. You always have been, and you always will be. Those other things were your old stories, but it's time to give them up. You just need to believe in yourself because you are far more than you know. So I've written an affirmation for us today, and I'll say it once, and then let's all, from wherever you are, say it together. I have the power to reframe my old stories and chart a new conscious path for the future. Let's say that together. I have the power to reframe my old stories and chart a new conscious path for the future. Unity of Arlington, thank you once again for inviting me to come and speak, for inviting me into your homes. I look forward to seeing you in person. Thank you, and namaste.